Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
Yes, I would describe myself as a socialist. I'd describe myself as a progressive.
Does Britain actually want socialism? And Nigel says this.
I'm afraid, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded.
The BBC reacts like this.
Farage with his customary inflammatory language there at a Reform UK press conference.
The mask slips. Plus,
I'm ambitious for all of our children, including the 93% who are in our state schools, and that's why this policy is so important, to give every child a decent start in life.
but is Labour about to U-turn on its flagship policy? It's a mixed day in the polls. One has Labour up, another shows the Tories are clawing it back. It's also a mixed day for Angela Rayner.
If me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it.
She's copping it for that, but then there's this.
The Labour leader has accused the Conservatives of using desperate tactics after Greater Manchester Police said it'll take no further action in its investigation into electoral irregularities.
And Lib Dem leader Sir Davey is finally making waves. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is doing all it takes to win the pensioners' vote. My top team this evening are columnist Esther Krakow, I've got Conservative commentator Albi Amankona, and journalist and political commentator Jonathan Liss. Oh, and can you work out what's happening here?
Very much.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Get ready for socialism. Next.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Well, the top story this hour, Geraint Davis has announced he's standing down as a Labour MP at the general election on the 4th of July. The Swansea West MP is currently suspended from the Labour Party following allegations of sexual harassment, which he denies, and has been sitting as an independent. He said he's disappointed he hasn't yet had a Labour Party hearing or any opportunity to clear his name. And it's understood Diane Abbott has had the Labour whip restored today after previously having it removed. Miss Abbott was suspended from the party last year after suggesting Jewish people do not face racism and that instead they suffer prejudice similar to redheads. She's apologised for that comment and had remained sitting as an independent MP for more than a year while an investigation was carried out. Miss Abbott has been a Labour MP since 1987. Now, pensioners could be in for a tax break collectively worth up to £2.4 billion a year as part of an election pledged by the Conservative Party. It could see tax-free allowances rising, netting around £95 a year per pensioner, that rising to £275 by 2029. The Prime Minister says it'll be funded by reclaiming money from those who deliberately evade tax. Labour described the plan as a desperate move, but Rishi Sunak said it's part of the government's strategy.
What I believe is that if you work hard all your life, you should have dignity in retirement. That's why we've protected the triple lock, which is going up by £900 this year for pensioners. But today what we've announced is the triple lock plus. We're going to increase the personal allowance for pensioners, delivering a tax cut worth around £100 to millions of pensioners, demonstrating our commitment to them, making sure that we can deliver a secure future for them. And in contrast, the Labour Party is that they oppose that policy, which means pensioners will be paying tax under any future Labour government, and that's a clear choice on offer at this election.
Rishi Sunak. Meanwhile, the Shadow Chancellor has told GB News that pensioners are in fact paying more tax because of Rishi Sunak's government. Rachel Reeves used her first major speech of the election campaign to spotlight the much criticised mini-budget of the former Prime Minister Liz Truss, which she's blamed for costing homeowners around £240 more every month. Speaking to GB News' political editor Christopher Hope, Ms Reeves said wages remain flat and taxpayers are being asked to pay more for less.
Everything that I put forward will be fully costed and fully funded, because I will never play fast and loose with the public finances, because when you do so, you put family finances and pensioners' finances in peril. And the Conservatives are now adding bauble after bauble to the Christmas tree without any idea of how they're going to fund these new commitments. Yesterday, they said they were going to use this money to create a national service scheme. Today, they're saying they'll use this same pot of money to give a tax break for pensioners. Well, the reason that pensioners are paying more tax today is because of decisions by this Conservative Prime Minister.
Rachel Reeves. Lastly, the Deputy Labour leader has accused the Conservatives of desperate tactics after Greater Manchester Police said it'll take no further action in its investigation into the sale of her council house back in 2015. Angela Rayner had been closely scrutinised over whether or not she'd paid the right amount of tax on the sale of that house after there were conflicting stories over whether or not it had been her principal residence. Well, in a statement released this afternoon, police clarified that matters involving council tax, they said, don't fall under our jurisdiction. Those are the top stories. For the very latest, do sign up to GB News Alert, scan that QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The general election campaign is really spicing up now. Sir Keir Starmer has spent the last couple of years trying to reassure everybody that Labour isn't a risk.
I've changed my party. We've changed our party. I've changed this party. This is a changed Labour Party. We were a changed party.
And then yesterday, he let this slip.
Yes, I would describe myself as a socialist. I'd describe myself as a progressive. I'd describe myself as somebody who always puts the country first and party second.
Well, there appeared to be an immediate attempt to row back on the first bit of what he said there, describing himself as a socialist. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said this.
I've always called myself a social democrat, and what I mean by that is that I believe that children from whatever background they come from should get an equal start in life to the opportunities that our country offers. I believe in strong public services to support people all through their lives, from the cradle to the grave, and I believe that work should always pay and offer security to people. So that's how I would describe myself.
But if Sir Keir Starmer is to be believed, i.e. he is a socialist, and if he was elected, Britain would presumably become a socialist country, then the big question has to be this. Does Britain really want socialism? Do we want to be a socialist country? The polls appear to suggest yes, we do. Most of the latest polling data puts Labour 23 points ahead. But what might socialism look like under Labour? Well, Labour has just been endorsed by 121 business bosses, which is a massive boost for them. If businesses don't fear socialist Starmer, then that's good for Labour. I will just caveat that slightly by saying that they've had to retract some of those in the last couple of hours, but still, the majority of that still stands. But there is a fear that Sir Keir Starmer would be in the pocket of the unions. One of Labour's biggest union donors, Unite, said Labour's plans for workers' rights had more holes than a Swiss cheese. What does that mean going forward? What would strike action look like? There is the other potential concern that modern British socialism means being aggressively pro-Palestine. The Socialist Workers' Party is all over these Palestine marches. Keir Starmer has said that he wants to recognise Palestine as a state, and there's this clip of Deputy Leader Angela Rayner appearing to grovel to a room full of pro-Palestine men.
I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it.
This comes alongside arguably Labour's most socialist policy, the VAT hike on private schools. There are calls for them to U-turn after a survey today claimed around 224,000 private pupils could leave as a result of the plans, double the previous estimate. What impact will that have on state schools? So, the question still stands, doesn't it? Does Britain want to be a socialist country? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am, of course, joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I have got journalist Jonathan Liss and Conservative commentator Albie Amankona. Albie, I'll start with you. Does Britain want to be socialist?
No. I will say that as a resounding no. At every opportunity that the British public have had the opportunity to vote in a socialist leader or someone even close to socialism, let's take Jeremy Corbyn, for example, back in 2019 and in 2017, Britain has said no. I think it's curious that Keir Starmer has come out today, or yesterday, whenever it was, and said, I am a socialist. I think we should believe him when he says he's a socialist. My grandmother always tells me, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. So beware, Britain. Starmer's a socialist. Don't vote him in.
Jonathan, I mean, Albie's got a point, hasn't he? We have never really been a socialist country. Do we really want to be now?
Well, I'm not sure that's true, actually. If you look at the 1945 to 51 Attlee government, that brought in a welfare state, vast nationalisation of major public services under a monarchy, under a very conservative, small C conservative establishment. It's not true that we've never had socialism in this country.
How long ago was that?
Well, I mean, I was just asked a question, I answered it, and you could say that a lot of the policies in the 1970s under Harold Wilson were also socialist. Look, Albie, you and I have no idea what the people of Britain want. We'll all find out in 5 weeks' time. Then we'll find out what the British people want. So that's our answer to that question definitively. But I would say that the Labour Party says in its kind of book it is a democratic socialist party, so I don't think we should read too much into it. Starmer is not saying he's a Marxist-Leninist. We're not going to have a communist revolution, and the Labour offering is pretty centrist in what it's actually giving.
So why say it?
Because he was asked a question, and socialism means different things to different people.
That's the problem.
No one can agree on what it means.
That's the problem.
A lot of people understand.
Brexit.
Look, a lot of people understand socialism to be what Rachel Reeves just explained in that clip about being a social democrat. Other people will say it's more like Marxism. Clearly, that's not what Starmer meant.
I'll bring you into this. I think the big fear for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, is that Keir Starmer will say whatever it takes to get elected, and upon election, we will have the destruction of private schools, possibly due to the politics of envy. We will have votes for kids who might be in the back pocket of the unions. They're not happy with him. What does he do if strike action starts ripping through the country, for example? Are you concerned about that?
Well, I'm not necessarily concerned about that because
particularly on the socialism point, we have had socialism. The problem is we've had socialism with no economic growth. So the pie that we're supposed to be sharing and redistributing has got smaller and smaller. We have French-style welfare spending without any economic growth to back it up. And so this whole idea of taxing schools, for instance, you know, what socialist do you know that actually wants to tax education? That doesn't exist in more left-leaning countries across Europe.
It's not taxing education.
Well, no, but it is, because the reason why we don't have VAT on essential goods is because they're essential goods. You cannot argue that education is not an essential good. It's actually... No, but hold on. But there's a reason for that. A lot of people, a lot of working class people actually got better opportunities in this country after the destruction of grammar schools because they got bursaries to go to private schools. He hasn't acknowledged that anyway, even though that was his background as well. So the point here is, it's not about being scared of whether he's a socialist or not. It's just being scared about the fact that things are going to continue as they are, which has been effectively socialism with no economic growth.
I wouldn't describe anything that this Conservative government has done as being socialist. But on the VAT point, this is about removing an unfair tax break.
It's not unfair.
It is unfair. It is unfair that private schools should have advantages that other people don't have.
Would it
Only
not be
7% of the
unfair
population
to dump 250,000 children into the state sector?
Without any more schools?
That report that you're citing, I think, has actually had a lot of... I think I was reading that it was kind of bankrolled or part of it was partly responsible by an organisation that has
we do have some real-world data. Yes, but we do have some real-world data. Can I just make this point? Which is that apparently 3,000 fewer pupils, 30,000 fewer pupils went to private school this year as a result of the fear, and that cost £20 million.
We can argue about the numbers, fine, but do you acknowledge that by virtue of fees going up by 20%, there will be people that will no longer be able to go to fee-paying schools? Do you acknowledge that? No matter the numbers, do you acknowledge that?
I think it really depends on...
No, hold on, but if anything goes up by 20%...
It will really depend. No, it will really depend on whether schools pass on.
That's basic economics. When something becomes more expensive, fewer people can afford it.
Not all schools are going to pass that on.
They will pass it on. A lot of schools will, which allow people like me, who can have been able to go to a private school without a scholarship or a bursary, to go to a private school. Do you accept that parents who send their children to private schools are relieving the taxpayer because actually they are opening up places to children who can't afford to?
It's not even that point. They're paying for a service they themselves are not using. Why should they have to pay for that?
All right, Jonathan.
If they're not using state education, why should they have to then pay extra?
It's like saying, why should everyone pay tax?
No, it's not. Well, if you're a childless person, you might have reservations about paying for all the other things in the welfare state that you don't benefit from.
The principle of the country is that everyone sort of pays into something, everyone gets something out of it. I mean, I don't think that's basically that's how the social contract is meant to work. I agree with you. The social contract is not working very well at the moment.
So do you think? I'll go down the line on this, but do you think the country should fear Keir Starmer?
Yes, because a lot of the time you will hear people say Conservatives are less scared of Keir Starmer because he's not a socialist. He's just told us he is a socialist. So this whole centrist dad that he's put across is a lie.
Jonathan?
I don't believe that Albie believes that. It's not about language, it's about deeds. I would love Starmer to be a socialist. I've been people on the left have actually been mostly disappointed that he's rowed back on most of the pledges he gave the Labour leadership, for example, in 2020. I think he needs to be a lot more progressive. At the moment, I'll be criticising the government from the left. What he calls himself is neither here nor there.
OK, and Esther, do you think there are aspects that we should fear when it comes to a Labour government? I mean, there does appear to be this slightly bizarre link at the moment as well between, socialism and also being quite rabidly pro-Palestine, for example, appeasing certain communities.
No, because it can't be any worse than what we've got now. I mean, the Tories have no leg to stand on. You can say, oh, you should fear Keir Starmer. You've been terrible. What are we more of the same? How is that? We've already experienced it, so how could it be much worse?
What does it mean to be rabidly why rabidly pro-Palestine?
Well, I would say that sitting in front of a group...
Do you mean pro-Hamas?
I mean, rabid is quite a charged word, isn't it? Like, you've got rabies. I mean, I would
argue that some of the behaviour that we have seen on the streets of London and elsewhere in this country for a considerable period of time has been rabid, yes.
Well, how has Labour exhibited any kind of...
Well, some Labour MPs have marched alongside that, have spoken at those events. We've also seen, the fact that Labour, for example, has been quite willing, I would argue, to pander to some of those people.
Well, by saying that Israel should withdraw water and electricity from the Palestinians?
Or, for example, the candidate that Labour stood in Rochdale that actually said that October the 7th...
He was disavowed.
Was a conspiracy theory, yeah, but you still stood him.
They didn't stand him. They didn't stand him. He was kicked off the ballot paper. He was kicked off the Labour whip before he was. That's why he wasn't elected. That's why Galloway got in. I don't think that you could argue that Labour has been too pro-Palestinian. Quite the reverse.
OK, all right. I wonder whether or not people make their own minds up about that clip of Angela Rayner in a room full of blokes there, you know, kind of kowtowing to them. Might have a different view, but obviously you're entitled to yours. Now, talking of giving things away for free, £20,000 has to be won in our Great British giveaway, and don't miss out. Yes, that's right. As the lines are going to close this Friday, here's all the details you need for your chance to win that cash.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Right, coming up, the first poll of the election campaign period has landed. Is it good news for the Tories? Has Labour lost any ground? Top pollster and co-founder of JL Polling Partners, Dr Tom Lubbock, crunches the numbers for us shortly. Plus, Lib Dem leader Ed Davey's finally making a splash in this election. More on his upstream battle to win over some voters shortly. But up next, Rishi Sunak says his plan to quadruple lock pensions gives voters a clear choice.
Pensioners will be paying tax under any future Labour government, and that's the clear choice on offer at this election.
But there has been fierce backlash online to Sunak's plans to ensure the state pension is never axed. Look, should British youngsters stop moaning about supporting pensioners? Director of Public Policy and Communications at the IEA, Matthew Lesh, he's live and he's next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
2,000 football banning orders have been issued to England fans ahead of this summer's Euro 2024 tournament in Germany. But authorities think that more than 300,000 England supporters could go to Germany, with Scotland fans, of course, also expected to travel in huge numbers. Well, I'm joined now by GBNews' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So you went to a press briefing this morning. As I understand, the authorities are gearing up to tackle what they see as a huge wave of potential hooliganism at the tournament. What's the latest?
Well, they're certainly not saying they're expecting hooliganism, and they are preparing for the worst, of course, if it happens, but hoping for the best. They say that in recent tournaments, England fans and, of course, Scotland fans have been pretty well behaved, but there will be very significant numbers attending that tournament, which gets underway in just over 5 weeks' time. That first match is Scotland taking on Germany in Munich, and of course just 2 days later it's England against Serbia near Dortmund. So 300,000 England fans alone they're expecting, because it's so accessible. I spoke earlier to Chief Constable Mark Roberts, who is the national lead for football policing. This is what he told me.
Positive, you know, England fans got a great record at recent tournaments. We know when any number of that people travel, there's always potential for issues, but I think the German authorities are really well prepared. And I think one of the positives, particularly thinking about our fans, Germany's a beer drinking culture, so the police are well aware of dealing with people in the nighttime economy. They deal with plenty of big festivals, so I think we're going to a place that is well suited to work with us to keep everyone safe and make sure there's no issues.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight. Coming up, is Labour's predicted lead at the ballot box slipping? We run through today's latest polls with polling expert Dr Tom Lubbock. But first, should British youngsters stop complaining about supporting pensioners? It's time for tonight's head-to-head. Yeah, it's a big one, this, for the general election. So Rishi Sunak has sought to secure the vote of Britain's older generation by promising a quadruple lock on pensions. This will be done by automatically raising the threshold that pensioners start paying income tax each year, so that they never have to pay income tax on their state pensions. It's expected to save 8 million older people around £100 in tax next year, rising to £300 a year by 2030. Well, it will cost the taxpayer around 2.4 billion quid. Here's what Rishi Sunak had to say about this earlier today.
You know, what I believe is that if you work hard all your life, you should have dignity in retirement. That's why we've protected the triple lock, which is going up by £900 this year for pensioners. But today what we've announced is the triple lock plus. We're going to increase the personal allowance for pensioners, delivering a tax cut worth around £100 to millions of pensioners, demonstrating our commitment to them, making sure that we can deliver a secure future for them. And in contrast, the Labour Party has said they oppose that policy, which means pensioners will be paying tax under any future Labour government, and that's the clear choice on offer at this election.
But have the Tories now lost the support of Britain's youngsters, with tongue-in-cheek responses like this floating around on social media, hearing that Rishi Sunak is going to announce mandatory blood donations for under-30s tomorrow in order to give new fresh blood to the over-65s. We'll also be entering under-30s in an organ lottery, with the organs of a few lucky young folks to be harvested to maintain NHS stocks. Labour, meanwhile, refused to match the pledge when they were asked this morning.
Will you, in Labour, commit to doing the same?
No, we think it's absolutely desperate. I mean, first of all, the only reason the state pension is anywhere near the personal allowance is because the Conservative Party's frozen the personal allowance for so long. And it seems that the money that they are promising to pay for this is the same money that they were promising would introduce national service just a day ago. So I don't think it's credible, I don't think it's real, and I think pensioners will completely see through this.
So tonight I'm asking, should British youngsters stop moaning about supporting pensioners? Let me know your thoughts. Head to gbnews.com/yoursay. Tweet me at GBNews, and while you're there, go and vote in our poll. Going head-to-head on this now, our author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and the Director of Public Policy and Communications at the IEA, it's Matthew Lesh. Christine, I will start with you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Should youngsters stop moaning about supporting pensioners?
Of course they should, if they're lucky. But only if they're lucky. They'll be pensioners one day, and they'll know what it's like. They've paid in throughout their lifetime, their working lifetime, to the system, and what pensioners are now getting is their due. It's not a handout. It's not free. We've earned it. We've paid for it. So, yes, they should stop moaning.
Matthew, you should stop moaning.
I think this is an outrageous and unfair policy. There is simply no good reason why one age group in society should get to pay less taxes than everyone else. It's quite clearly a bribe here. And we have to be absolutely clear about what's going on here. On the one hand, the Conservatives literally want to force 18-year-olds into a new form of slave labour that I can literally see having to wipe the bums of care home residents whilst they're forced to pay more taxes throughout their lifetime through this system, which, remember, 1 in 4 pensioners are already millionaires that benefited hugely from economic growth of recent decades, the inflation in house prices, they're less likely to be in poverty. Pensioners simply do not need this tax cut.
Okay.
And we absolutely have to blow up this myth that, the entitlement as a result of paying all their life. Pensioners will get far more out than they have paid in, significantly more, because we're far more generous as a society than we're in the past. We're far richer as a society.
Okay.
But it's just not fair to keep ratcheting up the benefits again and again and again for pensioners.
All right, I'll come back to you, Matthew. I'll come back to you, mate. I will come back to you, don't worry. Christine, quite a lot to respond to. There's something that 1 in 4 pensioners are millionaires. It's not fair. They don't deserve it. They're going to get more out of it than they're paying in. Do you want to come back to that?
Well, it depends how you define millionaire, doesn't it? Yes, quite a lot of pensioners are stuck in houses that are too big for them. They're worth a lot of money. They can't sell them because of stamp duty, etc., and the housing market, etc., etc. So, yes, a lot of pensioners are probably worth, in those terms, quite a lot of money, but they actually can't cash that in. So they need the money. And also, it's no good concentrating on the very rich pensioners. Everybody looks right at the top. Of course, there are very rich pensioners who don't need the state pension at all. But there are millions of pensioners who rely on that state pension. And the idea that you should begrudge somebody who has spent their entire life working very often in a menial, lowly paid job, why you should begrudge them now to have a decent standard of living, I just find astonishing. And as I said, one day, if you're lucky, you'll be a pensioner.
OK, look, Matthew, you know, why should elderly people who've had working-class jobs struggle to turn the heating on in the winter so that you can go and buy another overpriced cocktail at a rooftop bar?
Patrick, the personal attacks, they keep them coming. I mean, look, let's be honest here. There are a lot of pensioners who are well off and simply do not need this tax cut. The problem is that the government is broad-based in the way they give out these benefits. I would be perfectly happy to see increased benefits for pensioners who truly need it and less support for those who don't. I think that would be a far more fair system and a far less costly system when it comes to pensions. But at the moment, it's just hugely mistargeted to say that all pensioners should get these kind of increases in their pensions, as well as the other kind of benefits that we're all paying for through the NHS, through social care, through our highest taxes since the Second World War. There's just a huge kind of generational issue that we're getting at the heart of here. Now, it makes perfect sense during an election for the Conservatives to want to bribe pensioners to come out and vote for them. It doesn't make for particularly good policy. I mean, of course, Labour and the Lib Democrats and everyone else are pretty much doing the same. But again, this kind of electoral calculus is not healthy for the nation's finances. It's not healthy
Matthew,
for intergenerational fairness.
What is the state pension? What is the state pension every single year?
The state pension, the basic state pension, is about £11,000 a year. The UK now actually has about a higher state pension than the likes of Germany.
Yeah, but hang on a minute, you couldn't live off £11,500 a year, could you?
Look, Patrick, the point here is that most pensioners have other wealth as well. So, yeah, I think there should be a higher pension for people who that's the only asset they have. I'd obviously like to see a higher pension for those who need it the most and lower pensions for those who don't need the additional money and have assets and have wealth that they can depend on.
All right, there is I think, Christine, a compelling case for this being means tested, right?
Well, means testing, of course, costs a lot of money, so you lose a huge amount of money by means testing. I think there are huge generalisations going on here. I mean, millennials, I have no idea how old Matthew is. It's difficult to tell behind the moustache, but I don't know how old he is, whether he's a millennial or whatever. But the millennials seem to think that boomers like me, I've never had it so good, that we're selfish old fogies and we've ruined the planet for everybody else and we should just basically go off and die and not cost any money and not have any taxes. Boomers tend to think that, the millennials are financially feckless, work-shy, wokey, etc., etc. The truth lies in the middle, and I think it's the way you judge a society, the moral values of a society, is how they treat their older people, frankly, and those who treat their older people well. And yes, of course, there are millionaires who don't need the pension, but you'll probably find that some of those give the pension to charity. There are a lot of millionaires who are philanthropic and they give away a lot of their money. If you have any conscience about it, give away your pension. But to deny the people who really need it and to have their pension taxed away by stealth is appalling. So I applaud what the government is trying to do.
OK, all right, Matthew, for what it's worth, I do actually enjoy your moustache. So I will not have a bad word said about that. As somebody who cannot grow a moustache myself, I actually have the politics of envy going on right now. But both of you, thank you very, very much. Look, really good stuff. That's exactly what we wanted from a good head-to-head. And I think you've encapsulated quite literally, actually, the polarisation of where we're at with this policy. So thank you, both of you. As Christine Hamilton there, author and broadcaster, and the Director of Public Policy and Communications at the IEA, Matthew Lesh. Great stuff. Right, OK, who do you agree with? Should British youngsters stop moaning about supporting pensioners? Jill on X says, pensioners used to be young and supported their elders. What goes around comes around. The young will become elderly and need support. Liam says, why would the youngsters stop moaning when they will probably have to work until they're 70 to pay for today's elderly and immigrants? John on X says, state pensions are nothing short of a Ponzi scheme, so this should be a heads-up for young people to not rely on it being there when they are old. OK, all right, your verdict is now in. 84% of you agree that British youngsters should stop moaning about supporting pensioners. 16% of you disagree, for what it's worth. I am one of those 84%, so there we go. Right, coming up, Labour's VAT raid on private schools is their flagship policy, and there are huge calls for them to now U-turn on it because it's coming under fire. The policy is threatened with legal action and, frankly, fears that the pressure on state schools will be far too much. Should they just ditch it? So, former political secretary to Tony Blair, John McTernan, has his say on that very shortly. Plus, Nigel Farage makes this warning on the campaign trail.
So we're moving into an age in our inner cities and towns, I'm afraid, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded.
So is he right to sound the alarm? We debate that at 10. But next, the very first polls from the election campaign period have been released now. Has Rishi Sunak's shaky start cost him more ground, or is there reason for hope? I've got the co-founder of JL Polling Partners, Dr. Tom Lubbock. He's crunching the numbers for you, and the reason why he's such a special guest is because it's his lot who've just released quite a bombshell poll, so you will not want to miss that.
Good evening. From the Met Office, here's your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it is going to turn drier for most of us by the weekend, before then we still have some thundery showers around. Earlier on today we had a weather system pushing its way northeastwards across the country, bringing some heavy, persistent rain for many of us. That's now starting to clear, though lingering across some northeastern parts through this evening and overnight, and behind it, it isn't turning completely dry. Further outbreaks of showery rain, and some of these could still be heavy, possibly the odd rumble of thunder overnight. Many places staying quite cloudy, so temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, but there will be some clear skies around, especially towards the south, and here we could see a few pockets of mist and fog developing tomorrow morning. If we take a closer look at what's happening tomorrow morning, though, quite a cloudy start across northeast Scotland and some outbreaks of lingering rain here. Maybe some brightness across northwest Scotland around the central belt, but on the whole largely cloudy. Further outbreaks of showery rain to be had. Similar for Northern Ireland and Northern England, though some bright spells possible. A brighter picture, though, across central southern England. Greater chance of seeing some sunshine, particularly once any mist and fog patches clear away. As we go through the rest of the day, and it is going to be quite a showery picture for most of us. Any rain lingering towards the northeast may continue for a time, but the greater story will be the fact that there'll be some hefty showers, particularly for eastern Scotland, northeast England, some of these turning heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, the showers may be not quite as intense, but some rumbles of thunder are possible. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers, though, and temperatures rising into the mid to high teens or possibly low 20s towards the southeast. Thursday is going to be another showery day for many of us. Perhaps the showers not quite as intense as on Wednesday, but nonetheless some thundery downpours are still possible, though there will again be some bright or sunny spells in between any showers. Like I said at the start, it is turning drier into the weekend, and so particularly by Saturday and Sunday it's looking mostly fine and quite warm. Bye-bye.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys. Tonight, coming up, should Keir Starmer ditch his plan to hike private school fees by 20%? Massive calls for a U-turn on this. But before that, the very first polls of the general election campaign are out, and they've given the Tories a glimmer, and it is just a glimmer, of hope, with Labour's lead in one poll carried out by JL Partners reduced to just 12 points over the Tories. But another poll, also published today, has put Sir Keir Starmer's lead over the Tories at 23 points, up from 19. So, you know, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. So to dig deeper into these contradictory polls, I am joined now by the co-founder of JL Partner, Dr. Tom Lubbock. Tom, look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Two very different polls out today. Your one appears to put the Tories 12 points behind. Can you just explain why yours is right and the others are wrong?
I think we wouldn't be so arrogant as to say ours is definitely right, but we use different methods, and different pollsters have got different methods, and that will, in the end, prove to give you the most accurate result across the piece. So what we do is we say, well, there are lots of voters out there who tell us they don't know how they're going to vote. If you can believe that, they still say they don't know how they're going to vote. And we say, well, by the time of the election, most of them are probably going to vote one way or another. So we actually model how they're going to vote. We say, who do they look like in the group of voters who are telling us how they're going to vote? And then we allocate them to that party. And it's a method that's proven itself in the past. Not everyone uses it, but we think that's the right model for this election. OK, so if you've got the Tories 12 points behind, what do we normally expect during general election campaigns? We've got 5 and a bit weeks to go here now. We are starting to see some clear dividing lines between these two parties. Are you expecting those polls to narrow? Look, I think it's very dangerous to draw conclusions from one era in politics to another. This era that we're in, from 2017, 2019, now 24, all very, very different elections to those elections that came before. But you do tend to see parties like the Lib Dems, parties like Reform, the Greens, I think we've seen so far in this campaign, get really squeezed out of the coverage and therefore get squeezed in the polls. They may still do well in certain seats, but they will get squeezed in those headline voting figures.
OK, so if the general election was tomorrow and if your poll was correct, I appreciate we're dealing in hypotheticals here, but I'm quite keen to know what that would make Parliament look like. So what would that be?
It would be a healthy majority for Keir Starmer. Don't want to put an exact number on it because this is just one small sample poll that we've done. We will be doing modelling throughout the campaign on larger samples. But it would be a healthy majority for Keir Starmer. And that's why some of the reaction today, people perhaps overhyping some of these results, this would still be a majority for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, because all the big noise on social media at about 2:30 this afternoon was, oh, watch out, there's some spicy polling coming. And then a couple of polls dropped and it had Labour 23 points ahead, and then yours dropped and it was a slightly different story. So I do appreciate, I think people were trying to maybe get a little bit ahead of themselves there. When we look at some of the key policies that have been announced so far, so Labour, votes for 16-year-olds, I would say that's, well, that and the schools policy are the big ones for them at the moment, I would argue. You look at the Tories with national service and what they've done with the pensioners, which we've just been discussing. How are those things playing? OK, so what are you noticing as a result of some of those policies?
I have to say, on the Labour side, which is where I think we should start, I can't see that they've actually announced any policy that is of any relevance to this election so far. The votes for 16 thing is, I'm sure, for the next parliament. I'm not sure that's got any relevance to this campaign. They are literally getting that out there so that when they do it, it will help them in the next parliament. So that's where I think we are on that one. Labour presenting themselves as an extremely small target for the Conservatives, haven't announced anything really major in this campaign yet. The Conservatives, on the other hand, have given two really bold offers to their core voters, some of whom have, from 2019, shifted to reform. So that would be the national service and the quadruple lock, or the triple lock plus, as it's been called, on pensions. Those are incredibly big bits of policy. Those are very bold offers. And we'll see whether they really do shift the dial with those voters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't want to just entirely focus on Labour and the Tories. We had Nigel Farage out on the stump today saying what the BBC would describe as some quite inflammatory things, what many other people might describe as facts, actually, however unfortunate some of those may be when it comes to immigration, illegal immigration as well, and sectarian politics in this country. What do you make of how this might play with the voters? What do you see happening with reform?
Yeah, well, this election is being conducted at the moment against a backdrop of small boat arrivals, which pretty much look like they did this time last year. Maybe they're up a bit, maybe they're down a bit in some weeks. But the Conservatives have fundamentally failed to change the narrative on the small boats. And that is really going to limit the amount of upside they've got in this campaign, the amount of tightening you'll see. Maybe there's a rabbit to come out of the hat. Maybe a flight will go off to Rwanda or something. But at the moment, Nigel Farage has got a pretty clear playing field.
OK, lovely stuff. Look, great to talk to you, and thank you very, very much. And I really do hope to talk to you again rather a lot over this general election campaign. And, yeah, thank you very much for keeping us informed as well with all the latest polling data. That was the co-founder of the polling firm JL Partners, Dr Tom Lubbock. Coming up, well, we just heard a bit about him there. Nigel Farage's Dover speech exposes BBC's impartiality charade.
Nigel Farage with his customary inflammatory language there.
But is Nigel Farage right to warn that mass migration is bringing sexist, sectarian politics to Britain? We will get stuck into that shortly. And elsewhere on the campaign trail, Davey takes a dive. But next, as Labour's private school tax raid faces the threat of legal action, will Keir Starmer's alleged attack on wealth backfire? Former political secretary to Tony Blair, John McTiernan, attempts to defend this controversial policy amid big calls for them to just ditch it. Stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The most sexiest man in the UK at the moment, as voted for by a dating website, is that man on your screen, Jeremy Clarkson. I'm sorry, Peter, I know he's a man of a certain age, but I'm not getting this one.
Oh, you're not?
No.
This is another reason for an old wrinkly like me to be deeply joyous. Hope springs eternal. He's grey-haired, he's balding, he's got a bit of a pot belly, he's quite tall. You know, I reckon I might be in with half a shower.
As long as it's only hope springing eternal, love. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of guys watching this will really be a bit befuddled as to how he's the sexiest guy. I think it's a sympathy vote.
No, I get it. I understand it.
But he's got a sense of humour, and he's got plenty of money.
But what's there to understand? How is he the sexiest man?
I'll tell you why. Because he's and I say this as a bloke, he's a man's man. He gets stuck in, he's involved, he's practical, he's physical.
Does that make him
funny,
sexy, though?
He's got money. I think men these days are, if you ask me, too effeminate. And women don't want that. Women, well, I don't know what...
What do women want? Go on, just mansplain to me what women want. Go on, thank you very much. No, this is voted for by it's an illicit dating website, OK?
Oh, is it an affairs website?
Married women. But Idris Elba came third.
I just think Jez he's a man's man. He, like I said, he's physical, he gets involved, he likes a beer, he's got plenty of money. How much did he get for the farm on Amazon?
That's so silly. So you're implying women only go for men with money?
Well, no, but no. I mean,
He did, didn't he? Just said that. Yeah, it's got plenty of money.
it's normal for women to want to be with a man who can look after them. No.
No. Will you stop mansplaining what women want?
My mum had an expression, Ben. She said, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. But trust me, if Idris Elba gets himself a pair of wellies, he'll be second next year.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, is Nigel Farage right to warn that mass migration is bringing sexist, sectarian politics to Britain? But first, Labour's VAT raid on private schools could be challenged in the courts if Sir Keir Starmer wins at the general election, with the Independent Schools Council, which represents more than 1,300 schools across the UK, considering legal action. Now, Starmer's plan to hike private school fees by 20% from day one of a Labour government has become one of his flagship policies. But it comes amid warnings that there are very few state school places available for parents looking to escape Labour's tax hike, with at least 8 local authorities now claiming that there are actually no spaces at all. There are also fears that the policy could end up costing the taxpayer more, with data from the Independent Schools Council revealing that 3,000 fewer pupils have joined private schools this year, and that, by the way, has cost the taxpayer a whopping £22 million. Now, given that 80% of fee-paying schools have said they'll have to reduce scholarships and bursaries if Labour win, questions have been raised as to whether or not the policy will actually widen inequalities. There are a lot more to this, and I'm very grateful to be joined by the former political secretaries to Tony Blair, John McTiernan. John, look, thank you very, very much. I mentioned some things there. I've got a couple of others here. A Treasury analysis last week has found that if the policy forced 100,000 pupils back into the state sector, it will require an extra $650 million from the taxpayer every year. Well, the latest is that actually apparently 250,000 pupils, there or thereabouts, could be dumped into the state sector. This is an economic disaster, isn't it?
That's just made up nonsense figures.
Why do you say that?
Because they were made up. One's made up by the lobby, the industry that support private schools, and the other one was made up by Tory special advisors. Those advisors should be, we should be looking for job opportunities, brushing up their CVs rather than making up numbers about the Labour Party policy.
I mean, so if I have a look at this, it's a new report says that Sir Keir Starmer's VAT plan will mean that 224,000 pupils could leave as a result of the plans. It's double the previous estimates. You just think we should not believe the numbers, yeah? We just shouldn't believe that.
I think we should just not believe the numbers. That's absolutely right. They're just nonsense.
Right. So your answer to this is that we should just not believe anything. What about the knock-on effect? I mean,
it's not an issue.
It's not an issue.
No.
All right. Do you think that our viewers and listeners will appreciate that, John? Is that what Labour? Because I'll tell you who it is an issue for. It is a very real issue for the people who are desperately wondering about what they're going to do with their kids. Are the 8 local authorities all making it up as well, John, saying they've got no school places? Are they all Tories? Are they?
No idea who these local authorities are, but the truth is the state system has capacity. It's grown in.
How can you say that when you don't know which local authorities?
Because the state system has grown in capacity since the 1900s. Every time there's been a boom in demography, they've been able to accommodate kids. The state system can accommodate all the kids who want to go to it, all the kids who need to go to it. And if, heaven forbid, every single private school went bankrupt next Wednesday, all the kids could be accommodated in the state system. They would do, because it's...
OK, well, what evidence is there to... But, John, what evidence is there to back that? You've come on so far and you've said, don't believe the figures, some of them by the Adam Smith Institute as well. You've said don't believe the figures, OK? You've said also you've said don't believe the local authorities. All right. So can you now can you do me and our viewers and our listeners the courtesy of explaining to us with some facts why you think that every single private school pupil could actually be accommodated into the state school system?
So how about naming the 8 local authorities? And secondly, how about dealing with the issue? There's no problem about putting VAT on school fees. School fees have been rising in real terms over the past decade. There's no problem about adding any price on top of that. It's a fair thing to do, and the money will be invested in state education. We know that there's loads of stories around about falling roles in schools, and there are falling roles in schools because there are fewer children being born every year. And
there are some knock-on effects, though, as well, John. The average price of a house within the catchment area of a state school rated outstanding is 13.2% higher than those at good inspectorates. Parents aren't stupid, are they? And if they've got a bit of money, which presumably in your world, everyone who sends their kids to private school is minted, so they probably would just move to that particular area. That could have a disastrous knock-on effect for the local housing market as well. I mean, is that something you consider? The other knock-on effect as well is that a lot of private schools are linked to local state schools and academies. And so what they do is they share resources with them, they also share courses with them, and sometimes during teacher shortages, they share teachers with them. That would disappear, wouldn't it? These knock-on effects, John.
So I'm just interested in what you're saying. You're saying it's a bad idea for house prices to go up. I'm sure that's your position. The house prices rising is a problem. I'm not sure that's agreed by all the people who are watching.
OK, John, I think you are being deliberately obtuse with us on this. And our viewers, the thing is, John, you are here as a former political secretary to Tony Blair. This is a flagship Labour policy. You've been presented with a tremendous opportunity here to sell this to a load of people who are really worried about it. And if you've chosen to come on and not answer any questions or provide any stats and be quite arrogant about the whole thing, that's entirely up to you. Why would you want to take people out of private education and put them at the mercy of the National Education Union, run by a bloke called Daniel Kobidi, who attended a Marxist conference and called for intifada?
People who go to state schools are taught by the teachers in those schools.
Who are part of the National Education Union, aren't they?
The National Education Union does not tell any teacher, including my son, how to teach or what to teach.
They have actually wanted to change the curriculum to decolonise it, so that's not quite true, is it, John?
Oh, sorry, decolonising the curriculum is a very good idea. We need to decolonise the entire country.
Yeah. OK, and it's this kind of stuff that I wonder whether or not people might be a bit worried about. So you're not worried about the idea of the state system being swamped. You disbelieve the figures. You're not worried about the local councils. You disbelieve them. You're not worried about the pupils being taught by a bloke or who runs a union which is Marxist and has called for intifada. And you're not worried about certain knock-on effects as well, such as house prices, etc. So we should all just not worry about this. It's a massive policy and no one should care about it.
The Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies have done an assessment on the tiny number of people, and they're independent. They've assessed the tiny number of people who might make the choice. But we know that over the past decade, with increasing fees in schools, there has been no fall off in the number of people going to the schools. So I'm perfectly happy to believe that you can raise the money, you can make the state system fairer by investing.
Did you go to a private school?
Of course I didn't.
Have you got a chip on your shoulder about that?
No, of course I don't. That's ridiculous.
I just thought it was a relevant question. John, thank you very much. John McTurnan there, who is the former political secretary to Tony Blair. Thank you very, very much. Coming up, I speak to Conservative MP Greg Smith as the Tories are accused of prioritising pensioners over Britain's youth, and there's been an interesting development with the Rwanda plan, so do not miss that. But next, is Nigel Farage right to warn that mass migration is bringing sexist, sectarian politics to Britain? My panel return to debate that. And we're going to get your weather now with Alex Burkill.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. From the Met Office, here's your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it is going to turn drier for most of us by the weekend, before then we still have some thundery showers around. Earlier on today we had a weather system pushing its way northeastwards across the country, bringing some heavy, persistent rain for many of us. That's now starting to clear, though lingering across some northeastern parts through this evening and overnight, and behind it, it isn't turning completely dry. Further outbreaks of showery rain, and some of these could still be heavy, possibly the odd rumble of thunder overnight. Many places staying quite cloudy, so temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, but there will be some clear skies around, especially towards the south, and here we could see a few pockets of mist and fog developing tomorrow morning. If we take a closer look at what's happening tomorrow morning, though, quite a cloudy start across northeast Scotland and some outbreaks of lingering rain here. Maybe some brightness across northwest Scotland around the central belt, but on the whole largely cloudy. Further outbreaks of showery rain to be had. Similar for Northern Ireland and Northern England, though some bright spells possible. A brighter picture, though, across central southern England. Greater chance of seeing some sunshine, particularly once any mist and fog patches clear away. As we go through the rest of the day, and it is going to be quite a showery picture for most of us. Any rain lingering towards the northeast may continue for a time, but the greater story will be the fact that there'll be some hefty showers, particularly for eastern Scotland, northeast England, some of these turning heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, the showers may be not quite as intense, but some rumbles of thunder are possible. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers, though, and temperatures rising into the mid to high teens or possibly low 20s towards the southeast. Thursday is going to be another showery day for many of us. Perhaps the showers not quite as intense as on Wednesday, but nonetheless some thundery downpours are still possible, though there will again be some bright or sunny spells in between any showers. Like I said at the start, it is turning drier into the weekend, and so particularly by Saturday and Sunday it's looking mostly fine and quite warm. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking? Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life. Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight,
I'm afraid, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded.
the BBC's mask slipped.
Farage with his customary inflammatory language there at a Reform UK press conference.
Rishi Sunak's backed the pensioners.
Pensioners will be paying tax under any future Labour government, and that's the clear choice on offer at this election.
I've got a Tory MP on shortly, and...
Yes, I would describe myself as a socialist. I'd describe myself as a progressive.
We'll also be joined by a Labour frontbencher on socialism, votes for kids, and if there'll be a U-turn on that flagship education policy. Meanwhile... Ed Davey's desperately trying to make waves.
I'm sure that Keir Starmer will look at the strength of feeling and he will do the right thing.
And honestly, what the heck is going on with Diane Abbott? It looks like she's got the Labour whip back. I've got all of your front pages as well, with columnist Esther Kraku, the journalist and political commentator Jonathan Liss, and Conservative commentator Albi Amankona. Oh yes, and can you work out what's happening here?
Very much.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Is this really the immigration election? Next.
The top stories on GB News at 10 o'clock. Pensioners could be in for a tax break collectively worth up to £2.4 billion every year as part of an election pledge by the Conservative Party. It could see tax-free allowances rising, netting around £95 a year per pensioner, rising to £275 by 2029. The Prime Minister is saying it'll be funded by reclaiming money from those who deliberately evade tax. Labour, though, described the plan as a desperate move. Rishi Sunak responded, though, saying it's part of the government's broader plan.
What I believe is that if you work hard all your life, you should have dignity in retirement. That's why we've protected the triple lock, which is going up by £900 this year for pensioners. But today what we've announced is the triple lock plus. We're going to increase the personal allowance for pensioners, delivering a tax cut worth around £100 to millions of pensioners, demonstrating our commitment to them, making sure that we can deliver a secure future for them. And in contrast, the Labour Party has said they oppose that policy, which means pensioners will be paying tax under any future Labour government, and that's a clear choice on offer at this election.
Rishi Sunak speaking earlier on this afternoon. Well, the Shadow Chancellor has told GB News that pensioners are in fact paying more tax because of Rishi Sunak's government. Rachel Reeves used her first major speech of the election campaign today to spotlight the much criticised mini-budget of the former Prime Minister Liz Truss, which she blamed for costing homeowners around £240 more every month. Speaking to GB News' political editor Chris Hope, Ms Reeves said wages remain flat and taxpayers are being asked to pay more for less.
Everything that I put forward be fully costed and fully funded, because I will never play fast and loose with the public finances, because when you do so, you put family finances and pensioners' finances in peril. And the Conservatives are now adding bauble after bauble to the Christmas tree without any idea of how they're going to fund these new commitments. Yesterday, they said they were going to use this money to create a national service scheme. Today, they're saying they'll use this same pot of money to give a tax break for pensioners. Well, the reason that pensioners are paying more tax today is because of decisions by this Conservative Prime Minister.
Rachel Reeves. Now, a man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after a woman was fatally stabbed on a beach in Bournemouth in Dorset. Police were called to reports that two women from Poole had been stabbed last Friday night. A 34-year-old woman, named in media reports as Amy Gray, was pronounced dead at the scene, while a 38-year-old was taken to hospital with serious injuries and is still receiving treatment. The Mayor of London has criticised the government's failure to introduce a total ban on so-called zombie knives, calling it a betrayal of the safety of young people. Sadiq Khan is calling on the Home Secretary to bring forward the legislation which would include a ban on the sale of the weapon. He says the government isn't taking the crisis seriously enough and that he's set aside more than £150 million in the capital for policing and crime prevention. And lastly, Pope Francis has had to apologise for using an offensive word to describe gay men after reports appeared in Italian media. Two of the country's biggest newspapers reported that he used the slur when suggesting there were too many gay people in priesthood colleges. He's in the past told bishops to be carefully vetting new priests and reject any suspected homosexuals. The Vatican says the Pope didn't intend to use any homophobic language, and he apologised to anyone who was offended. That's the news. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The general election is the battle for Britain, and today Nigel Farage made it clear that he thinks this is the immigration election. He spoke about the Channel migrant crisis.
I've actually filmed this. I've filmed on the 12-mile median line people throwing their iPhones into the sea, throwing their passports into the sea, doing everything they can so that we can't track and identify them. Although it's OK, because they get an iPhone, a new one, within 24 hours of arrival. But I think this is a national security issue.
He also said mass immigration is leading to sectarian politics.
And you might have noticed that Angela Rayner yesterday was campaigning in her constituency, begging a group of Muslim leaders to please vote Labour. You'll have noticed not a single woman in the room. So we're moving into an age in our inner cities and towns, I'm afraid, I'm worried to say, of sectarian politics with women completely excluded.
He was pressed on this by reporters who demanded to know what he thought British values were.
I didn't talk a lot about British values.
You did on Sunday.
Well, I think women playing a part. I mean, you're here, which is interesting, because if you were at an Angela Rayner meeting, I doubt you'd be welcome. And indeed, if you see the victory celebrations from the local councillors, from Burnley to Bradford to Leeds to elsewhere, no women. The idea that I'm saying this is all British Muslims is absolute nonsense.
Let's remind ourselves now of that Angela Rayner clip.
I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it.
Well, this is how BBC newsreader Greta Guru Murthy, whose brother Krishnan, complete coincidence, of course, reads the news on Channel 4, reacted to Nigel's speech.
He has said that this is now a matter of national security.
Nigel Farage with his customary inflammatory language there at a Reform UK press conference.
Not particularly neutral there. The apology followed.
Nigel Farage. Now, an apology. Earlier today, we heard live from Nigel Farage speaking at that election event that we just saw. And when we came away from his live speech, I used language to describe it, which didn't meet the BBC's editorial standards on impartiality. I'd like to apologise to Mr Farage and viewers for this.
And today, a picture emerged that Nigel might claim proves his point somewhat. The man who came third in the West Midlands mayoral contest is standing to be the MP in Birmingham Ladywood. Here is his campaign poster. OK, so you've got the Palestinian colours there and the slogan, "Lend Gaza your vote." All right? And Labour MP Naz Shah gave an election broadcast that certainly was not in English.
तो अभी प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऋषि सुनक ने ऐलान कर दिया है कि हमारा समर इलेक्शन होगा, जनरल इलेक्शन होगा 4 तारीख जुलाई की 4 तारीख को 9.5 साल.
Is it inflammatory to talk about sectarianism in Britain, a failure of integration, assimilation and multiculturalism? Or is it just stating facts? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I have got columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I have got journalist Jonathan Liss and GB News contributor and Conservative commentator Albi Amankona. Esther, I will start with you this time. Do you think it's wrong for Nigel to point at sectarianism in British politics, perhaps an increased amount of it?
I don't think it's wrong. I do think it's strange because there's a bigger, easier issue to target here. Yes, he is right, of course, there's a rise of sectarianism, but the fundamental point is that if you have huge swathes of people coming into the country, it's difficult to integrate them properly, regardless of what their face or their background is. It's obviously more difficult for people with certain cultural or backgrounds. Of course, that is the case. But there's a fundamental point here which you could easily make without having to say these kinds of things and have the media sort of pigeonhole him as an Islamophobe, which is if you have more people in the country and our public services are not able to sustain those numbers of people, everyone is going to have a worse quality of life. You're going to have wages depressed. You're going to have longer NHS waiting lists. People can't get a home. You can literally see graphs of how the fact that immigration has increased by 7 million since 1997 and how that has impacted house prices, how that has impacted NHS waiting lists, education, all these things. These are the central points to make. To talk about these sort of identitarian issues, which are true, are not fundamental to the fact that actually we are sharing an increasingly smaller and smaller pie with more people. It doesn't make sense. He doesn't need to go down this route. I mean, he is valid, but I'm just saying there's a more fundamental issue here you can address.
All right, Jonathan, I'll bring you into this. When we do look at some of those victory events, like Nigel was alluding to there, or we do look at some of the things like Angela Rayner, or even actually some of the campaign rallies for George Galloway in Rochdale, it was almost entirely men around there. Is there a concern that actually amongst certain communities who are now arguably becoming more politically empowered that women's rights don't really exist that much?
Well, I think it's a grotesque thing to say. We have female Labour and female Muslim Labour MPs in this country. I can think of at least 3. I think there might
Conservatives.
There might be. Well, right. But the point remains then. So it's not just left-wing people either. So to say that sort of Muslim women are not sort of politically active or engaged in this country, or somehow barred from their community from being sort of prominent members of their community is just absolute nonsense. It's deeply offensive. I'm sorry, but Nigel Farage has a history of making sexist comments himself. He said breastfeeding mothers should sit in the corner, working mothers are worthless. He said maybe it's because I've got so many women pregnant over the years, I have a different view of maternity leave. This is a man who has no leg to stand on. Can I just politely
say to you, I really hope he has said those things, otherwise you will be hearing from Nigel Farage's lawyers quite soon, I imagine.
Well, that was quoted in the Daily Mirror, so I got the article of the Daily Mirror. These are comments he's made in the past. On anti-Semitism, he's been criticised by the Board of Deputies of British Jews for making anti-Semitic dog whistles. He's obviously made...
Does that mean that what he's saying now isn't true, though? Because you can come at him for those things, but is what he's saying about this now wrong? That massive, rapid levels of immigration is increasing sectarian politics? Because I would argue we can actually see that.
Well, I mean, what does sectarian politics mean? I would argue that no one has done more for the politics of division and cynicism in this country than Nigel Farage.
I get what you mean. I get where you're coming from with Nigel. That's fine. That's your view, OK? But on this issue, is he right? Are we seeing an increase in sectarian politics?
But I'm trying to understand what you're getting at with that question. Do we have a divided society in this country? Absolutely. Is there a problem with sort of race relations in this country? I would argue yes, and I would argue that's coming from the very top of government.
I think the central point he's making here is about integration, which is kind of the buzzword here. Yes, if you have loads of people coming in a short space of time, it's harder to integrate them. But even if you had smaller numbers or few of them, how do you integrate them properly? If you come into Britain, you have to sign up to British values. And clearly there are groups of people in this country that are living parallel lives alongside each other that haven't adopted that. That's the point he's making, except very, very
could I ask Albie your opinion on whether or not it should be considered a national security issue, what's taking place in the Channel? Because that was another feature of what he was saying there.
Yes, I think clearly an argument can be made to say if there are undocumented people coming across the Channel, we don't know their background, we don't know anything about them, that could pose a security risk. But to answer your question about are we seeing a rise of sectarian politics in this country, no, I don't think we are seeing a rise of sectarian politics in this country any more than we have done in the past. I slightly agree with what Jonathan is saying here, actually. I think it's very inflammatory and quite dangerous to start saying things like, we are seeing a rise in sectarian politics in Britain where women are being excluded from politics, when there are Muslim women in politics. There are lots of women in politics in this country. OK, and then you had a go at a politician speaking Urdu. And do you know why she was speaking Urdu, Patrick?
Hang on a second, I didn't have a go at it. I was saying that is something that happened.
Hang on, I'll tell you why they speak Urdu. And in some languages, in some communities, maybe communities that aren't as well integrated, it's quite often the women that won't be able to speak English, so they can't take part in democracy. That is wrong.
Why is that?
That is wrong.
Why can't they speak English, Albie?
I've said that's wrong. They've not integrated. But the point is, you can't on the one hand
there's not a problem. OK, there's not a problem with women's rights among certain communities, but there is a problem with women in those communities not being... And why don't they?
Patrick.
Could it possibly be because those women don't leave the home that much,
Patrick, I've just said it's wrong. I've just said it's wrong, but you can't on the one hand say it's wrong for that politician to speak Urdu when actually that's a direct appeal
I'm not
to
saying
women.
it's wrong for her to...
And then on the other hand say there's a rise in sectarian politics where it's being exclusionary.
How does that
That's making his point, though, because if there's a rise of sectarian politics, it's because of these groups of people that haven't integrated properly. On that point, actually, there's 48% of Pakistani and Bangladeshi women in this country are economically inactive, which is between the ages of 16 and 64, which means they're not looking for work and they're not in employment. So that is also a fair point with regards to sort of how these communities treat women. And how that affects their politics, and whether those politics actually reflect British values. You can have whatever opinions you want, but you have to sign up.
I don't think that I think it's. I just really balk at singling out communities. There are all kinds of problems with integration. There are integration problems in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in North London. There are pockets of other communities that might have been here for a long time, from East Asia, for example. In other South Asian communities where people might have been here for a long time and don't know the language doesn't mean they're not British or integrated otherwise.
Actually, that's exactly what it means.
OK, guys, can I just pause? Because I believe that I might be able to show you something that is literally happening right now in Whitehall. All right, OK. So apparently that is an ongoing event in Whitehall at the moment where police are swooping in on a pro-Palestine event. We are seeing this more and more now. I mean, Albie, do you still honestly not think that sectarianism is an issue?
That has nothing to do with sectarianism, Patrick. They are protesting for peace, and we know we all work in news, Patrick.
What about
we know what's happening in Rafah at the moment, and people are angry about it.
Yeah.
It's perfectly reasonable for people to protest on the streets of London because they're angry about thousands of people dying in Palestine.
So what about the group, the political active group, the muslimvote.co.uk? Is that not sectarianism then?
I don't know what the muslimvote.co.uk is. There are Christian groups in politics. There are Jewish groups in politics. I get involved in things like Conservative Friends of Israel, for example. Would you call that sectarian politics? Look, I don't like religion in politics at all. I think we should keep religion out of politics. But you can't just say it's an issue when Muslims get politically active and have their own groups and not other religions as well, when there are many.
And I think I completely agree with what Albie just said, I'm very happy to say. And also, I think that there is such a double standard across the political discourse in this country that so often, if you take a statement that a politician says about a Muslim person and apply any other ethnicity to that, there would be such an outcry, but particularly in the Conservative Party, there seems to be a blank check for Islamophobia, what Saeed Awasi famously called the dinner party test, where it's acceptable to be Islamophobic at a dinner party, where it wouldn't be for any other ethnicity or race.
But do you think there is an issue when it comes to women in some cases?
Well, in certain communities, yes. Well, I think the broader point is a poor integration of many, I think, minority groups. You saw that outburst of violence among sort of Ethiopian groups that were pro and anti-government. Why do we need to see that in London? They're not in Ethiopia, right? I don't think you can just apply that logic. Yes, it is true that certain Muslim groups struggle with integration or haven't integrated properly, but I think you can cast that net much wider. All right, lovely stuff. Guys, a rip-roaring start to the hour. Thank you very much. Coming up, Angela Rayner has been cleared of criminal wrongdoing by the police, but has the investigation now been handed to HMRC? Is the Labour deputy out of the woods yet? Plus, it continues to be backs to the wall for Rishi Sunak's campaign team. My panel react to that and the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But before that, facing the right way this time, Rishi Sunak did make a big pitch to win over the so-called silver vote.
Pensioners will be paying tax under any future Labour government, and that's the clear choice on offer at this election.
But is he putting pensioners before young people? I put that to Conservative MP Greg Smith. That's right after this.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Apparently alcohol abuse is costing England £27 billion a year. I mean, in fairness, that's the price of 2 rounds in London, Nicholas.
Yeah, tell me about it. Not that I'm a big consumer of alcohol. I'm very Mediterranean in my consumption. But revealed, alcohol abuse costs soar to £27 billion a year. So this cost basically encompasses a variety of aspects, from health-related problems, so the cost on the NHS, lack of productivity, people who lose their jobs, social services, and all that. And of course, it has been on the rise, 37% more compared to last time this was studied in 2003. So now Institute of Alcohol Studies and some other groups are pushing or asking for tougher taxes and tougher regulation. But is that the solution? Like in ancient Rome, they said, in medium stat virtus, like moderation, virtue is in moderation. And again, if they're going to raise the price, people like myself or yourself who are moderate consumers, pardon?
You're going to turn to heroin. Because it'll become... I mean, well, this is what's happened in Scotland.
It becomes unaffordable, so...
Yeah, in Scotland, they had minimum unit alcohol pricing, and so it pushes up the cost of getting off your tree for your average Scottish ne'er-do-well who likes to sit on a bus stop and drink a bottle of cider. So instead, they're turning to street drugs, which are cheaper by comparison.
That is just terrible. I like that the alcohol industry have come back on this. A guy called Matt Lambert, who's the chief executive of the Portman Group, and they represent the alcohol industry. And he says that the IAS, that's the group who've created this, have failed to take into account the significant direct economic contribution of the alcohol industry to the wider economic and social benefits of moderate and responsible alcohol consumption. Well, it's so true, isn't it? We've got a declining birth rate. We need people to get drunk and chat each other up.
Yeah.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight on GB News. Still to come, I will bring you the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages with tonight's lively panel, and we'll be speaking to a Labour frontbencher. But the Conservative Party has made 2 flagship policy announcements that have pitted the young against the old, vowing to bring in mandatory national service for 18-year-olds while also promising a new quadruple lock to guarantee retirees won't pay income tax on their pensions. This pension guarantee alone is expected to cost the taxpayer around £2.5 billion. I'm joined now by Tory MP Greg Smith. Greg, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. This pension's quadruple lock or triple lock plus or whatever it is, how do you respond to allegations that you have prioritised pensioners over young people?
No, I really don't think it's a case of that, Patrick. It's we haven't got the full manifesto yet. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely packed with offers for every age group in our country. But there is something that has been fundamentally unfair in the last few months when it comes to pensioners who have found themselves paying tax when they were never really expecting their personal allowance to drag them into tax, given the 8.5% increase to pensions through the triple lock this year. And I think it is right. It's something I've raised with the Chancellor before, and I think it's right that we do have this offer that means that pensioners shouldn't have to pay income tax as their state pension goes up. But we equally do need a solid offer for young people as well. When you look back at some of the things this government has done in terms of increasing the number of apprenticeships, increasing educational opportunities through things like T-levels, I think we actually do have a good background to come at this from, and we need to push that offer to ensure that young people understand.
I mean, I think, well, with respect to, I think you probably are going to have to push that quite a bit, because this national service stuff, I mean, who is exempt from national service? I mean, what if you have a full-time job? What if you're playing football for England at the World Cup?
Look, these are fair questions, and it's a policy that's only come out in the last 24 hours. Also, I think it is important to draw this distinction between, it's not just about saying you've got to be in the army for a year. There is the option of the community service once a month. That's a build on the National Citizen Service scheme that came in under the coalition government. That actually, when you talk to a lot of young people, they've really valued being able to take part in that scheme. It's clearly a policy that's got to have the tyres kicked on it quite a bit to ensure that we've got it right. But I think it's very important that people understand it is not about telling every young person they've got to spend a year in the army.
I do get that, but I think for some people as well, though, and I am going to press you on this, really, which is, do we know who is exempt? If an 18-year-old has a full-time job, you know, and they are working 5 days a week and they are contributing to the economy in that way, are they still going to have to do one weekend a month delivering prescriptions to pensioners? And again, you know, look, this might seem like an egregious example of this, but it is one nonetheless. If an 18-year-old, like Kobbie Mainoo at Manchester United, is he going to be, you know, doing search and rescue at the weekends, is he?
Look, I think the clear answer, Patrick, is no. And if we win this general election, we're in government, and this legislation to introduce it is in front of the House of Commons, I can certainly say that I would be backing any amendment to ensure that certain people are exempt from this. To follow through your sporting example, you know me, you know I love Formula One. Well, lots of racing drivers are actually 16, 17, 18, 19, and I wouldn't want to see the next generation of British talent in motorsport held back by this. So I think, you know, it's a piece of legislation for the future that would have the tyres kicked on it, and I think it's right that it should be shaped by people who understand that there are some people that probably should be exempt from that.
Yeah, I mean, the latest polling did show that 42% net were in favour compared to, I think it was 38% no. So, you know, there's some merit in it possibly there. Look, on immigration, though, I do actually have a tweet from Nigel Farage that I would just like to bring up on the screen. So Nigel has decided to articulate illegal immigration through the medium of an old-school wartime graphic there. He is calling this an invasion. Would you call the illegal immigration on our south coast an invasion?
The volume of illegal migrants crossing the channel at the hands of the people smugglers is outrageous. It is unacceptable. We have passed 3 bits of legislation to try and clamp down on it. The lefty lawyers have found the loopholes in pretty much all of them. Look, I speak as a backbencher. I signed all the amendments to put in the notwithstanding clauses to make that legislation tougher, to try and get around the ability for those lawyers and those very wealthy lefties to be able to challenge the government through this. Sadly, those amendments weren't there. We clearly do have to take action.
You are apparently just on this. The news that landed, Mr. Smith, in the last couple of hours, really, was apparently the High Court has now asked you to clarify when the first flights to Rwanda are going to take off, because the government told the courts that it wouldn't be in July, but now Rishi Sunak is openly saying that it will be. The public could be forgiven for not really trusting your party when it comes to Rwanda, couldn't they?
Well, we've passed 3 bits of legislation. We were the ones that pioneered the Rwanda Economic Partnership. Other countries are looking to follow us in similar schemes with Rwanda and other safe third countries. The world is waking up that we need these partnerships in order to tackle the illegal flow of migrants, largely at the hands of people smugglers abusing people, in our case, in the waters of the English Channel. We've passed the legislation, but we are being constantly frustrated by the courts. So the answer, I'm afraid, is probably to make the legislation tougher, and maybe we were right first time when we put forward those notwithstanding.
Very, very quickly and very finally, Rishi Sunak has come out and said that he is talking to Boris Johnson again, apparently. Do you think you should bring back Boris for this campaign?
Look, Boris has got great charismatic values. I know that when I've seen him campaigning, people love him. You know, I've seen people come up to him in the most unlikely places, wanting selfies with him and whooping and cheering. I think Boris would be fantastic to have on the campaign trail.
All right, look, Greg, thank you very much. That's Greg Smith, Conservative MP. Look, coming up, Ed Davey makes the only splash of his election campaign so far. Plus, are the Tories about to launch their secret weapon?
When it comes to Boris, and I said it a lot during the summer, that I'm very proud of the things that we did together.
But will you call him?
Well, will we be seeing Boris Johnson back on the campaign trail? But first, though, we do bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. They are hot off the press, and I've got a Labour front bencher coming up very shortly as well. Lots of questions to answer there as well. Don't miss it.
Good evening. From the Met Office, here's your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it is going to turn drier for most of us by the weekend, before then we still have some thundery showers around. Earlier on today we had a weather system pushing its way northeastwards across the country, bringing some heavy, persistent rain for many of us. That's now starting to clear, though lingering across some northeastern parts through this evening and overnight, and behind it, it isn't turning completely dry. Further outbreaks of showery rain, and some of these could still be heavy, possibly the odd rumble of thunder overnight. Many places staying quite cloudy, so temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, but there will be some clear skies around, especially towards the south, and here we could see a few pockets of mist and fog developing tomorrow morning. If we take a closer look at what's happening tomorrow morning, though, quite a cloudy start across northeast Scotland and some outbreaks of lingering rain here. Maybe some brightness across northwest Scotland around the central belt, but on the whole largely cloudy. Further outbreaks of showery rain to be had. Similar for Northern Ireland and Northern England, though some bright spells possible. A brighter picture, though, across central southern England. Greater chance of seeing some sunshine, particularly once any mist and fog patches clear away. As we go through the rest of the day, and it is going to be quite a showery picture for most of us. Any rain lingering towards the northeast may continue for a time, but the greater story will be the fact that there'll be some hefty showers, particularly for eastern Scotland, northeast England, some of these turning heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, the showers may be not quite as intense, but some rumbles of thunder are possible. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers, though, and temperatures rising into the mid to high teens or possibly low 20s towards the southeast. Thursday is going to be another showery day for many of us. Perhaps the showers not quite as intense as on Wednesday, but nonetheless some thundery downpours are still possible, though there will again be some bright or sunny spells in between any showers. Like I said at the start, it is turning drier into the weekend, and so particularly by Saturday and Sunday it's looking mostly fine and quite warm. Bye-bye.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. I have got the front pages for you now. Let's do it. All right, what are they all kicking off with today? The Metro, locking horns, tax battle rages over pensions. Labour slams Sunak's triple lock plus as he claims Reeves will cost every family 2k. Yeah, another big dividing line now at this election. Let's go to the Daily Mail. Tory vow to ban rip-off university degrees by changing the law. Interesting this. Up to 1 in 8 students could see Mickey Mouse courses axed in radical plan to fund 100,000 new apprenticeships. I'm calling it now. This is going to be a story that I will be covering a heck of a lot on tomorrow's show. I think the issue of Mickey Mouse degrees versus apprenticeships is something that a lot of people hold dear, certainly when they see their student loans every single year. And they also go as police drop the Rayner Council House probe, she faces a fresh row over a pledge to recognise Palestine. Let's shift on to the Times. Sunak plans university cuts to boost apprentices, so they're leading with it as well. They've also got, it's an interesting one, Labour bars Diane Abbott from standing as its candidate. Yeah, OK, but as I understand it, she's still got the whip back. It is, well, we'll talk about this a bit later on, but it is a little bit of a mess. Let's go to The Guardian. Israeli spy chief threatened ICC official over war crimes inquiry. They've also got a story here. Labour vows to clear NHS waiting lists in 5 years. Well, that will be fascinating to see exactly what their plan is to do that. The Eye. Triple lock plus to save retirees 28p a week on state pension. I think they're taking a sideways look at that Tory policy, aren't they? Rishi Sunak's proposed new triple lock protections would save retirees 28p a week, apparently. Let's go to The Telegraph now, just round off this particular tranche of newspaper front pages. Sunak, I'm talking to Johnson about the election. In an exclusive interview, the PM declares that he is a Thatcherite and defends his national service policy. I am joined, as ever, by our columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, journalist Jonathan Les and GB News contributor Albi Amankona. So, yes, look, here is what Rishi Sunak said to The Telegraph about Boris Johnson earlier today.
When it comes to Boris, and I said it a lot during the summer, that I'm very proud of the things that we did together.
But will you call him?
Oh, we've been in touch, actually. We were in touch. Yeah, we were in touch just the other day, actually, talking about the risk that Starmer would pose to our country's security.
And is he going to hit the campaign trail
and the damage
with you?
he would do. Well, look, that's a question for him. He's a busy guy as well. But we were in touch. We were in touch. Yes, exactly.
Well, as we know only too well, Boris is a man who does know how to win an election. Albie, do you think they need him on this campaign trail?
No, I don't think they need Boris on this campaign trail. It would always be nice to have Boris's help in a campaign. He is, after all, very good at winning elections. He's just very bad at the bit in between. Rishi Sunak also said that Boris Johnson was a Thatcherite. I'm not really sure on what metric anyone could describe Boris Johnson as a Thatcherite. It's nonsense. He's very good at winning elections, not very much else. So that's all.
He was good at winning an election against Jeremy Corbyn, OK?
That's exactly.
He
won the London mayoral election.
But yeah, he won London by being this sort of liberal progressive. Then he sort of, in the 90s, he was a hang him and flog him conservative who hated single mothers. Then he became this trendy urban, Cameronite green Tory. Then he went to being this sort of right-wing, Brexit supporting, Rwanda deporting.
What metric is Boris Johnson right-wing?
Boris Johnson is not anything. He's in favour of he's the leader of the Boris Johnson party. That's the whole point.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because Labour were absolutely bending over backwards to get rid of Boris Johnson, because despite all of what you said there, which there is, by the way, a lot of merit to some of the things that you guys have said, he is a force at an election campaign, and I dare say...
Do you know why? Because he's the only politician with a personality in a very long time.
But I think that one thing that we have to also bear in mind, that it's sort of 2019, fine, Jeremy Corbyn, he's also not a popular politician then, and people have still not forgiven him now. We have to remember, Patrick, that the origins of the Conservatives' current disaster started with Partygate. In fact, Owen Paterson a month before that. The Conservatives have not been ahead in a single poll conducted anywhere in the UK since November 2021. That started and was really accelerated by Partygate, then finished off by Liz Truss.
I would argue it was also really accelerated by the way that the media went after a little bit of cake and some cheese and some wine, but...
Well, that's you can take it up with the rich people because they did not like it.
OK, well, all right, I think that was slightly overplayed, but anyway. Let's just go to the front of the Daily Mail. Tory vowed to ban rip-off university degrees by changing the law. Now, I actually think this is quite interesting. OK, so Mickey Mouse degrees are something that get a heck of a lot of stick. People end up getting saddled with a lifetime of student debt. Apprenticeships are practical trades that I think that there is, at times, a bit of a stigma against. Esther, what do you make of this in principle? I know we're only getting a surface look at this right now, but should more people be encouraged towards apprenticeships as opposed to underwater basket weaving at Bath Spa?
I mean, I don't know if that's an actual degree, but of course they should. But I think that there are two separate issues here. One, you should let universities fail if they're not good enough. This whole idea of importing a bunch of students on overpriced degrees that are basically worthless to give them a backdoor way into the UK, I think that's actually criminal. And there's also should be something criminal about saddling 18-year-olds with tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt for pointless degrees. But on the apprenticeship point, I don't think it should just start with universities. I think it should go even before that. I think the idea of, making it mandatory for 16-year-olds to be in full-time education, I think actually work is a form of education. And I think they should probably find a way to target this towards 16-year-olds and streamline them into a profession a lot more easily.
Yeah, I'm just reading into this a bit now, and there'll be a lot more on this tomorrow, but a new law will grant powers to the Office for Students, the independent regulator... that's the topic in itself, actually, but the Office for Students, the independent regulator of higher education, to choose underperforming courses to stop students being sold a fake dream. So, I mean, essentially it is stopping students... they say anyway, being sold a fake dream. Of course, this all started under Blair, didn't it?
Look, I really resent the kind of conversation that suggests that university education should be for a narrow elite of British society, overwhelmingly middle class, obviously a lot of them privately educated as well, and that people should know their place in this country and that people shouldn't have aspirations to higher education.
No one is saying that.
But I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm saying that a lot of this conversation is mediated around those assumptions. And actually, I think it's been a great thing that we've expanded university education. Which I started on to John Major.
Here's the thing.
Well.
The argument that university should be a tool for social mobility is absolutely spot on. Yes, you're right. But the point is, it's not a tool for social mobility when over half of young people have them, and you have 21-years coming out of university with about £50,000 worth of debt. There's nothing socially mobile about starting off life with so much debt.
I would love to have free tuition. I support free tuition.
It's also about the value of these degrees in the workplace. And I understand the point about saying, let's open up university, but if they're doing a degree which doesn't actually get them a high-paying job afterwards, that's not social mobility, is it?
I also think there's a stigma.
Look, I don't think we need... Not everything needs to be about sort of high-paid jobs. I mean, you know, a lot of people do very academic jobs that are not highly paid. That's not what... That's not...
The whole point of a degree is an investment. You're investing in yourself. If you're investing in... If you're paying £50,000 and then earning £21,000...
high-skilled jobs that are not well paid, and that's a different conversation.
Let's just whiz on because I want to squeeze this in as well. So today, the police confirmed that they have dropped their investigation into Angela Rayner over whether she failed to pay tax on her former council house. But a Greater Manchester Police spokesman said this: matters involving council tax and personal tax do not fall into the jurisdiction of policing. GMP has liaised with Stockport Council and information about our investigation has been shared with them. Details of our investigation have also been shared with His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So no evidence of criminality, and she has always denied any wrongdoing. But she's not out of the woods yet, Albie, is she?
No, she's not out of the woods, but I almost resent that we're having this conversation because you spoke earlier on about the cake and that being quite trivial, and I do think that's trivial, but I almost think this going after politicians for these small, minor things that all people do and people did during the pandemic, is this really what we want politics to be? Or do we want to be focusing on the things that really matter? This doesn't really matter to anyone. Cake didn't matter to anyone.
Look, it wasn't. That's not true. So can we just nail it?
It's inconsequential because if she didn't pay taxes, it was maximum about £2,000. So that is inconsequential. But it's the fact that it's her, and she's always been sort of righteous and sanctimonious about other politicians, and she's always been the first person to say this person should resign over this discrepancy and that person should resign. So it's a bit of poetic justice. But yes,
it's not poetic justice. She didn't do any wrong.
Well, she didn't do any wrong, and it's pointless because even if she didn't pay taxes,
she has actually said that HMRC says she doesn't have any back tax to pay. Look, this whole thing, Patrick, was a smear campaign by Tory MPs who are...
I've got your tweet, actually. Because I think... and then I'll get you to talk over it, right? So we've got... I believe this is what you tweeted earlier. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's Angela Rayner's...
Oh, this is Angela... Sorry, I've got Angela Rayner's first. There we go, sorry. The Tories' desperate tactics have been exposed for what they are and for all to see. They failed once again. But I do believe you did mention...
I did. I said that... this whole the Tories are completely offended and outraged by a left-wing working-class woman who doesn't play her place. It is not nonsense.
What basis do you have to make that point?
The worst thing, Patrick, is that Greater Manchester Police basically have admitted that they've consciously intervened in politics on behalf of the Conservative Party. Anyone could have said that he didn't take it a too much investigation. No. No one is saying that. It was obvious from the very start that this statement makes perfectly clear that so many of these things that she's been accused of are outside the remit of the police. That didn't need an investigation to work out. That should have been obvious at the start. Oh, this is crime that she's been accused of. That's not our business. What she was accused of which is a false declaration, was actually outside the statute of limitations after a year. And that, again, could have been established within 10 seconds. It didn't need a police investigation. This was aiding and abetting the Conservative Party, using the police force to attack a political opponent. It's a complete outrage, and the police need to come forward and explain whether... what exactly... No, I'm sorry.
I think that is a massive statement.
What she could have... What was the crime she was accused of?
People will be shouting at their television screens now, Jonathan, saying, what about Durham? What about beer and korma? What about all of that?
Another thing that was completely ludicrous, and there was no case to answer in the end.
Or the flip side of that, of course, is to say the exact opposite of what you've just said there, which is that a Labour Police and Crime Commissioner would have wanted to sweep that under the rug. Now, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's the opposite of what you've just said, and I think when we get into that kind of territory, it gets a bit risky. We are going to be hearing from the Liberal Democrat leader there, Davey, who's been out in the Lake District today, trying to get media attention in any way possible. Shall we have a little look?
Okay.
I'm enjoying this, honestly.
And the BAFTA goes to... Yes, there we go. I mean, you think that was fake, Esther?
Yeah, it's fake, of course.
It was fun.
But guys, we're talking about Ed Davey.
We're talking about it.
We didn't talk about Ed Davey otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
It was funny. It was well played. It showed his human side. It was well played.
When he comes down with dysentery in a couple of days' time, they've been pumping. The Lib Dems are simultaneously claiming that Windermere is full of poo because the Tories are pumping our waterways full of sewage, and they've just dropped Ed Davey right in the middle of it. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I won't make it. We're in an election period. You know, this could be interesting to see now. I mean, although you're right, though, it's a stunt. It's a gimmick.
It is a stunt. It's a gimmick. Look, no one talks about Ed Davey otherwise. So he's got his headline. He's got us talking about it. Well done, Ed Davey. He might need some Diarrhea though afterwards.
Yeah, honestly. Oh gosh, bless him.
It's not the first time he's done this though, because there is. He's got form for this. So he's. We can have a little look at it now.
Remarkable they're trying to make out this is some great policy when they were the ones who increased taxes on pensioners in the first place by not raising the allowance. It was the Liberal Democrats who fought hard to increase the income tax allowance to help pensioners and help people on low incomes, and the Conservatives froze those tax allowances. So I don't think pensioners or anyone else is going to be fooled by the Conservatives having broken their promise, having raised taxes, now suddenly, just before election, saying they're going to do something different.
Yeah, well, I thought we were going to show you another Ed Davey stunt there. That was actually him talking about a policy, so there you go. But anyway, right up next, Diane Abbott. Diane Abbott has been banned from standing as a candidate for the Labour Party at the next general election. Is this going to create an almighty row within the party? And there are serious rumours that Keir Starmer lied about this particular investigation into Diane Abbott. I am joined, hopefully, by the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, to get some answers. Don't go anywhere.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
He's meeting his father, the King, for just the second time since his father's cancer diagnosis. Harry's going to an Invictus Games gig at St Paul's on Wednesday, and his father is hosting a garden party at Buckingham Palace. Once they're all said and done, about 7 p.m, they are going to meet, apparently.
Yeah,
but crucially not the Princess of Wales.
Well, I think it's a wonderful story, and obviously you would. If you're visiting the country, you haven't seen your dad and he's ill with cancer, of course you'd go grab a Costa. I can't wait to see the pictures of them in Costa together, just having a little catch-up.
Do you know they might embrace?
I would hope so, but...
Do you know, I think it's really important that life's too short not to have a relationship with your family. I know too many people that aren't speaking, or they've fallen out because of money or whatever, and we're only on this earth for a very short time, and what a shame not to have a relationship with your own
haven't they?
son.
I mean, it's the trust issue that is really the problem here, and straight after this they're going to be heading off to Nigeria, and they're still involved in all of these sort of like commercial and media activities. If you don't have that trust there with your family, and you're responsible for breaking that trust down, it's not really, it's sort of on you, isn't it?
It's still mendable, though, I think, and we've all got people in our family that maybe we wouldn't trust with our bank details or something like that, so they can just not. You know, Charles shouldn't be going to Harry, guess what, you can't tell anyone. He's like, that's not what they're going to talk about, are they? They're not going to tell him anything.
The King is his father, but it's different, isn't it, if it's your brother, it's your sibling, whereas a father's probably perhaps more likely to be forgiving and to be wanting to sort of reunite. Do you think maybe it's going to be harder for him to mend that relationship with William and Catherine?
I think it's really, really hard. I mean, I can't see how they... But they need to get in a room together. They need to speak. The only way that you are going to break down barriers when it comes to relationships is by facing it and speaking about it.
You say life's too short, but some would say, well, that's a perfect reason not to tolerate any nonsense.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. It is time to return to the paper review. Just a heads up, we are hoping to get Labour frontbencher James Murray in a matter of moments, but I have got some more front pages for you in the meantime. We've got the Mirror first here. Cops drop Rayner probe. Home sale claims are binned in yet another blow for Rishi Sunak. There's also a picture there of Maya Jama, Stormzy, the King and me. Love Island, pages 12 and 13. Oh, it's a page-turner. Daily Express. PM. Axe to fall on university rip-off degrees. Rishi's plan to boost young people's skills with 100,000 new apprenticeships. Well, this will be interesting to see how this plays, actually, frankly. So Rishi Sunak is vowing to essentially do away with what many people might regard as meaningless university degrees that are sold arguably under false pretences to young people, and maybe try to smash that stigma of practical trades. Well, I'm joined again by my panel. We've got columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, journalist Jonathan Liss, and GB News contributor Albi Amankona. One of the topics that has been quite a big story today has been Diane Abbott. Now, there's been a bit of kind of odd hokey-cokey about Diane Abbott. So there was some kind of investigation into some of the allegedly anti-Semitic comments that she made, amongst other things as well. We were told originally that they would wait for the results of that investigation, and it was still ongoing. Now it's emerged that investigation apparently finished 5 months ago. Then, the way it was reported today was that she lost the whip, then she got the whip back, but she's been banned from standing. I mean, this is a bit of circus, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing is, they're trying to make her leave with dignity, clearly, but that ship has sailed. I think the way they treated her was terrible. I think they should, a few years ago, force her to just stand down, because she's made a lot of mistakes. And I think to treat the first female black MP that this country's had in that way, regardless of what party you have, is actually quite disgraceful. I think she's someone that should have been allowed to retire from politics with dignity, and not been subject to the games of Keir Starmer and him trying to basically find a convenient way to silence her. And, I think, yeah, she's made a lot of mistakes, but I wish we didn't see it, because I think it's a stain on her reputation that I don't think is necessary.
Well, that's interesting, because I take that, but I think some people, Albi, might say, well, what she said was anti-Semitic, and...
yeah, of course, but...
And that is... Well,
we used to have respect for our elders. I mean, at some point in the past, we used to actually have respect for our elders. We used to cringe at them, seeing them disgraced and embarrassed and humiliated when it was avoidable, if you could tell them to just...
The question for Sir Keir... Yeah, the question, I think, a big question for Sir Keir Starmer, I was hoping to put this to James Murray, but apparently he's just been on Newsnight, is about whether or not Keir Starmer's lied about this.
Yes. Because the point is it's since come to our knowledge that this investigation finished 5 months ago. And, I mean, the fact that in the investigation over this Observer letter that she wrote, I think it was a couple of paragraphs, how can that take as long as it took to investigate whatever that problem was? I agree with Esther on the points about Diane Abbott being treated badly, but she did also make a mistake. And I think we have to decide as a society, are we a society that wants to forgive people that makes mistakes and then apologises for them, or doesn't? Are we that society or not? I know what I'd prefer.
Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, yeah, it is this point of whether, if it is that Sir Keir Starmer has known that this review has finished 5 months ago, well, we've been lied to about that, haven't we? And why is it only happening now? Why is this happening now? You know, where she's been banned from standing. We're in the run-up to the general election campaign.
Well, obviously it's happening right now because Parliament's been dissolved on Thursday, and the question is whether she will be a Labour MP when she leaves Parliament. Look, I actually agree with a lot of what both of you have said. I think that it's disgraceful the way that she's been treated. I think that she, after being in Parliament for 37 years, should have had the right to decide whether she wanted to
even if she has been anti-Semitic.
She's made a lot of mistakes. She's made a lot of mistakes.
She's been in Parliament for 37 years. That kind of public service should mean something.
I actually agree. Look, I actually agree with what Albie has said, that we do have a system. We should have a system where people can apologise and correct their actions.
So what if Nigel Farage said sorry for all the things you don't like now? Would you just forgive him?
Well, it would depend on what context he was apologising for, what he was apologising for, who he was apologising to. There'd be all kinds of things. Look, what Diane Abbott said in that article, in that letter, was indefensible, and she apologised for it profusely. She withdrew it. She apparently did an anti-Semitism training course that was managed by this disciplinary process. That has come to an end. She should be forgiven.
All right, all of you, thank you very, very much. Look, we are not going to get James Murray tonight now, apparently, unfortunately, but hopefully we will get him tomorrow. We were supposed to be having Labour frontbencher there, James Murray, but there will be more questions to put to hopefully somebody in the Labour Party tomorrow. Thank you very much. Headliners is up next, and we'll be back tomorrow from 9 p.m. for another rip-roaring show as we steam through the general election campaign together. I'll see you then.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. From the Met Office, here's your latest GB News weather update. Whilst it is going to turn drier for most of us by the weekend, before then we still have some thundery showers around. Earlier on today we had a weather system pushing its way northeastwards across the country, bringing some heavy, persistent rain for many of us. That's now starting to clear, though lingering across some northeastern parts through this evening and overnight, and behind it, it isn't turning completely dry. Further outbreaks of showery rain, and some of these could still be heavy, possibly the odd rumble of thunder overnight. Many places staying quite cloudy, so temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount, but there will be some clear skies around, especially towards the south, and here we could see a few pockets of mist and fog developing tomorrow morning. If we take a closer look at what's happening tomorrow morning, though, quite a cloudy start across northeast Scotland and some outbreaks of lingering rain here. Maybe some brightness across northwest Scotland around the central belt, but on the whole largely cloudy. Further outbreaks of showery rain to be had. Similar for Northern Ireland and Northern England, though some bright spells possible. A brighter picture, though, across central southern England. Greater chance of seeing some sunshine, particularly once any mist and fog patches clear away. As we go through the rest of the day, and it is going to be quite a showery picture for most of us. Any rain lingering towards the northeast may continue for a time, but the greater story will be the fact that there'll be some hefty showers, particularly for eastern Scotland, northeast England, some of these turning heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, the showers may be not quite as intense, but some rumbles of thunder are possible. There will be some sunny spells in between the showers, though, and temperatures rising into the mid to high teens or possibly low 20s towards the southeast. Thursday's going to be another showery day for many of us. Perhaps the showers not quite as intense as on Wednesday.
It's the final week to see how you can win a whopping £20,000 cash. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. You've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the UK's most popular baby names have been revealed, with Noah and Olivia again topping the annual list. In at number 2 is Mohammed. For boys, list is on the screen here. Number 3 for boys is George, then it goes Olivia, then it's Leo, Arthur, and so on. And for girls, so Olivia is number 1, then Amelia, Isla, Ava, Lily, Ivy, Freya. There we go. Any of those names take your pick? Where's Dawn, by the way?
Well, yeah, there's on the Telegraph website, right, there's a really good way linked into this where you can actually put your name into the search engine, and these are names from 2022, by the way, and it tells you how common your name was, and I did put Dawn in. It's never been that popular. Can't think why. And there were only 5 babies named Dawn in 2022.
Really? That's surprising.
It's not
Wow.
full confession here, right? My middle name, Mum, I hate you, is Maureen. Why is everyone laughing? My middle name is Maureen, which is a good old-fashioned East End name, and that has completely died out. There were no babies named Maureen.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Names like Keith, for example, Peter. Would you call a baby these days Keith or Ian? Baby Ian?
Without a doubt. I feel like I'm in a persecuted minority, you see, because later on, when I'm watching the boxing with Terry, Steve, Mick, Phil and Kev, right, and Peter, there are no such names featuring in this list. We are dying out. Our names will soon be gone forever, and I feel victimised by it.
Likewise, I should think we should start a campaign group and go on a protest march through London.
Cans, what do you make about Mohammed being number 2 for boys' names?
You know, I'm not going to comment on people. You know, they're going to call what they want to call. What I find interesting